Hey, RetconRaider here, and welcome back to Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. As today, you know what? I am fed up, both literally and figuratively. You know, I mulled on it over lunch, but I think I really had already kind of convinced myself even before I hit that pause button. But we don't know if Kalkazar's plan will even work. It seems pretty far-fetched. We definitely can't trust him. He has betrayed every single one of his allies, or at the very least sent them to certain death. I mean, Tanakia up top. What's her face? The acolyte sent to stop us when we went through the gate. So yeah, and I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very telling that when we walked around this grand chamber, there were no other named characters to be found. That's because there are no characters left in Kalkazar's orbit, aside from us, whom I will note he is now trying to pretty blatantly threaten into cooperation. That aside, we've also got Nomos in our corner, and he seems to have his own thing going on. And I definitely trust him at least marginally more than I trust Kalkazar. So, with all that in mind... Sorry, Cal. Maybe if you'd approached me about all this earlier, if you'd been more upfront when we first met, you might have actually swayed a younger and more naive me. But after everything you've done, both to me and my friends here, both directly and indirectly, all the problems you've caused, all the people you've killed, I don't really think I see cooperation in our future, even though I do find your idea intriguing, if not particularly plausible. So no, we will not be working together. Which I imagine will result in me having to kill you, but you know. Your move. Heinrichs, eliminate the rogue trader. Kalkazar gazes at the unmoving interrogator. No, I think we're good there. Heinrichs? After a brief pause, Heinrichs nods and responds gravely. I no longer recognize your authority, Lord Inquisitor. My apologies. In that case, Heinrichs von Kalox, in the name of the Emperor, I hereby revoke your inquisitorial privileges and declare you excommunicate traitoris. The punishment for your heresy is death. I bid you farewell. The Inquisitor nods calmly. There is not a shred of hatred or disappointment in his face. Farewell, then. I am glad to have made your acquaintance, Valen, despite everything. He glances at his retinue. Eliminate the rogue trader. And here we go. Right to it. Yep. And as expected, the various hangers-on, all the nameless mooks, they are indeed just here for the potential fight. Though at least I see the servants have run clear. And then I suppose we probably have some in back, too. We saw folks all the way... Oh, yeah, we've got some stragglers. Though for the most part, it does really seem like expendable mooks. It's mainly just Kalkazar, and then like 3 other prominent threats beside him. The bodyguard next to him, the guy off to our right, the veteran, and then the mystic off to our left. Though we do start surrounded, so we'll have to plan around that. That said, I'm not super worried here. Aside from Kalkazar himself, I'm not anticipating much real threat. I also suspect that this is not our final boss. I imagine that will be the Catan chart itself, since they'd still need a boss for the players to fight, if they did end up working with Kalkazar. Man, I really hate clustering everyone up, but we need line of sight. Yeah, it's fine. We'll make do. I mean, we're going to kill most of these guys beside and behind us, momentarily anyway. Just got to get the big guys locked on Abby. Honestly, the rank and file mooks are like non-threats. They'll go down in one hit each. So unless they come in like infinite waves or something, my main assumption here is that they're primarily just there to control our deployment zone. You know, notice they've got 2 position, for example, to prevent us from starting behind cover. Kind of subtly sets us up to be alpha striked, except, you know, grand strat. So we can just clear them out and immediately tuck people under cover. Or at least half our crew. Does seem like Kalkazar rolled pretty high on initiative. Two mooks out. Mystic ablaze. We'll go ahead and double tap. And now we've got Cass. Let's group them up. Or at least as best we can. Yeah, that works.
I'm not accustomed to being ordered around.
Less effective than I'd hoped, but, you know, kind of expected. Let's go ahead and tag someone else in. Probably Val. Yeah. Val gives us a lot of options. Also, this will give him a chance to get under cover. At least in theory, I mean... Well, you know what? We can at least tuck into the damage zone. The backline zone. Though I would prefer to actually be hugging cover. Lay down fire.
I'll make it happen. On it.
And... oh, we're not really positioned for... yeah, that's fine. I was kind of hoping to go for an ult, but...
as duty demands.
But Abby and Heinrichs are both too far. They're the ones we'd theoretically want to go on mook clearing duty. Though we do have it now. But we're going to keep Abby focused on Kalkazar. We'll lock down 3 of the 4 prime threats. Perfect. Hammer time.
At your beck and call.
Oh wow, Cal, I am not seeing a lot of parrying over there. This does not bode well for you, my friend.
Break them around.
Oh, dude, this is just sad. But, you know, it's okay. He's not the real end boss anyway. He may have been the prime catalyst, setting all these events in motion. But, much like Conrad, he's largely just ended up falling by the wayside. Side note, I didn't mention it last time around, but, based on what Tanakia told us, I'm actually pretty sure the reason that Kalkazar didn't know that we were Theodora's heir is because we were never intended to be her real heir. I think that's just something she was holding over our heads, sort of like how she used it to control Conrad. And it was probably a similar situation with the other guy, too, the psychic, Ethelthred. We were likely just intended to fill in spots in her bridge crew. If I had to guess, I'd say that we were destined to replace Conrad, hence his very aggressive posture towards us right from the start. Since obviously he was on his way out after trying to play games with Kalkazar's spies, only for Theodora to go completely nuclear on them. In fact, maybe that's what Ethelthred was for. Maybe he was intended to become a new member of her astropathic choir, maybe even the head, given that it had essentially been gutted after the mind-reading ritual. I could certainly see her replacing Zachary after that. But yeah, I mean, given her just generally duplicitous and manipulative nature, I imagine that introducing us as potential rival heirs was more just to ensure our loyalty and that we would strive to provide the best possible service since we were in quote-unquote competition with each other for a position which she, of course, had no intentions of ever giving up.
Let's make it quick. Throne take you.
Her death was a complete fluke, you know, something so unrelated to everything else going on that it is something you can completely miss if you just don't happen to have Argenta with you during Act 3. Without the torment of Kimura weighing on her, she just otherwise never gets pushed to the point where she feels the need to come clean. Which I will say, you know, does more or less fit the general theming we've seen throughout the campaign. All these various NPCs, these power players who consider themselves to be the main character of the story, only to meet a humbling and ignominious demise. Conrad, Theodora, Marzai, Euremerus, Tervantius, Uralon the Cruel, etc. And even Kalkazar himself, having squandered the bulk of his resources in enacting his grand plan, now bereft of allies, and finding himself slain by his single surviving acolyte and the rogue traitor that he sought to bend to his will. Also, I suppose, the Messiah of Discontinuing and Ulfar Thunderlung. I suppose they might also have some reason to want this guy dead.
I won't object to it.
Which won't be too much longer now. We're just going into round 2 and he's already halfway down. Oh yeah, we've got another alt on tap. This actually might be it. Let's drop the Mystic.
But of course, Lord Captain. I won't object to it.
Someone's death wish is mine to grant.
Mystic out.
The Emperor is on our side.
Okay, so we won't finish it here, but we will. We will do some serious damage. Yeah, he's just too much of a brick for Heinrichs to really take down, at least in his current hybridized build. The original intent of his build was basically to make him a backup Abby, a secondary tank to fall back on for times when Abby isn't with the rest of our group. The only real difference is he's slightly less tanky, but he's got psychic powers and slightly more offense.
My vow is to serve.
Round 2. Let's wrap this up. Clear the last of the mooks. Still got the guy in back behind that, like, tech lamp post or whatever. Plus 2 off right. Oof, goodness. Yeah. See, that's our biggest threat these days, is hurting ourselves. It's fine, though. We'll live. Let's make sure we get the guy behind us, the one that Ulfar kicked. And yeah, we'll go ahead and whittle down the veteran. This guy off right. I do want to make sure that Ulfar gets in at least one good lick on Kalkazar. If just for the narrative closure, you know? But let's get this guy off the board. Let's go ahead and clear this guy now. Mook out. Oh, right. I guess we do still have one also far back right.
Isn't this a job for the serfs?
Shouldn't be an issue. That's just another Texorcist. I actually do love that he's using the same strategy we do. Deliberately breaking from combat just so he can charge back in for the extra attack. Alright, Ulf. Let's get you in there. Oh, well, that's not where I wanted you, but we can probably make that work. Let's clear the guy off right. And relocate.
See how the wolf succeeds!
Suppressing fire.
The fame-hungry come.
Inappropriate.
So shall it be.
Hold.
Let's make it quick.
All right, Cal. You had a good run. Let's get you off the board. Might clip Heinrichs.
Too highly of your skills.
Oh, get over it. And Cal out, though still distinctly alive. Gotta get those last words in, just for extra pathos. Shoot, clip strike. Ulfar? Veteran out, which just leaves you.
The wolf is on the hunt.
Too far for Ulfar, I think. But not for Heinrichs. Yeah, you probably should have run.
No, it is too early. The yoke must be activated, or all is lost.
An invisible yet clearly tangible aura of power envelops the figure clad in the robes of a tech priest. It is all the more baffling to hear a youthfully excited voice from under the hood. This is it, the place of our origin. Nomos's gaze is trained upon the Catan shard. It was your strike and your wish to escape your prison that begot us. The mysterious creature that has been your ship's soul for so long turns to face you. But it is you, Valin, who truly ushered us into this world. So let us meet our abominable precursor together, for it is ready to break free. It's probably not great. Are we... Okay, no, we're good. Autosave locked everything up for a sec. Suppose it's fitting that they're the ones who put Cal down. I will say, it was a little weird that we were, like, walking after him while he limped to the console, but you know what? It turns out he was too late regardless, so I guess that's fine. It was just for dramatic effect. If, however, he had actually gotten there and then done something, I would have called foul. It always annoys me when you just stand on the sidelines while something you could have easily intervened in takes place. But, you know, usually it's with much more irreversible results, the death of a bystander, etc. In this particular case, I can't imagine there's much we would have been able to do regardless to stop this thing from breaking free. And thus, it must be slain. Or perhaps forced back into the box. I'm not really sure which is more feasible.
It will be done.
But I suppose we'll find out.
Indeed.
Lock him down.
It will be done.
Oof. Okay. Dodged and parried. Cool, cool. That's not at all concerning. Hi there. Eroding shard copy. Also, he... Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah, he shuffled our guys all over the place. And we've got 3 shard copies. Thankfully, much, much weaker. But it did put some of our guys in problematic positions. Alright, let's see if we can still injure the big guy. We might have to eliminate the duplicates. In fact, that might be the key to this fight. This might be one of those fights where you have to kill the various copies they spawn off, or minions, etc., with each one that dies taking a chunk out of the big boss's health.
Opponents cannot damage a star.
Okay, so we know we can pull them around. That's good to know. Heinrichs? Probing strike. Alright, alright. Full damage inflicted. So in theory, they're relatively easy to take down.
Opponents cannot damage a star.
No! These ruby flashes are choking me!
You're fine. Set zones.
Request approved.
And we still need to do a probing strike on the big guy. See if they are now more resistant to damage with the copies in play. Well. You know, the biggest thing that'll suck is if...
The spiritual prognosis is favorable.
Is if Val gets Alpha Strike before we can get him back under cover. Probing strike.
Fleeting moment of integrity.
Right. So So very resistant to damage. I think we've got another Edge of Daybreak situation here.
A shattered divinity.
Right, Ulfar. You know what? You're already there. Why don't you go ahead and take a few more shots at this guy? I mean, I would like to focus down the ads, but it is important to try to keep this one distracted.
Cannot damage a star.
Well, how about suppressing fire? Can I at least debuff you? Minor damage, but we did get the DOT and presumably the debuffs as well. How about electrical? No, nothing.
Cubs play. My drought is ruined.
Slight uptick there.
I have become the All-Father's worthy instrument.
Okay, no, I think we have to focus the ads.
I hunger for battle.
But we'll have Ulfar hang out there. I do notice he's bleeding. I think that thing inflicts levels of bleeding every time you hit it. Alright, Val. Let's get you under cover. Oh, nice. Okay. Wasn't sure if it would take a swing. Though we are injured, we must have soaked up some collateral. Let's lay down fire. Start trimming ads.
The threads of purpose are unraveling.
Oh, close. Heinrichs? Reach for the stars.
I'll see our foes obliterated.
Reality is a tapestry of contradictions.
First ad out. No notable effect on the main.
Everyone, step aside.
Go for two.
A fleeting moment of integrity. Gone.
Let's see to it.
Close.
The threads of
Out, I guess. And Heinrichs. Finish him off.
I have suffered the singularity of annihilation.
Copy two. Out.
For the throne's glory, Only terror. Smite your enemies.
Damage a star.
There we go. Okay, now we're seeing some actual damage.
Let's see to it.
Streets of purpose.
Though it is still very much a brick. Oh, interesting. Okay. Some actual real damage there. I would expect no less from the final boss.
I will do my duty.
Though I will say, it does feel a mite bit tame for
At your beck and call.
an ancient elder god, but I suppose it is just a fragment.
Damage a star. The threads of purpose unraveling.
Damage seems reduced again. Let's take out copy 3. Alt on tap. Suppressing fire.
A fleeting moment of integrity. Gone.
Alt.
The threads of purpose are unraveling. Wolves. Reality is a tapestry of contradictions.
Copy 3 out. No response from the big guy, but we should now, theoretically, be able to do full damage again. Let's get eyes on. Not great, but it is something. And, you know, round around we build up momentum and do more damage over time, so it's a process. My main concern being what they'll do when they hit various health thresholds. Since obviously that's what we saw with the Edge of Daybreak and other similar bosses.
Approved.
But if it's just the copies, I think we're okay.
Running binary override. A fleeting moment of integrity. Gone. The realm of centuries is faster than light.
Oof, goodness. I mean, that is a bit scary. Our heaviest tank losing half his health in one salvo. So, you know, we can't get too careless here.
None can do this better than a warrior of the All-Father. The threads of purpose are unraveling.
Guy's got 21,000 wounds, so the big question is what happens when we get him down to about 15. Can't charge. Top off. This guy does do enough damage that we should be careful with our health. But as long as they stay focused on our tanks, we are in pretty good shape. I do think, though, that a full salvo on like Val or Pask would effectively one-shot them. Nice, nice. But we can do better.
Consider this a taste of what's to come.
Or not.
Accept your lot.
Distressing lack of crits there. Given this thing manipulates probabilities, maybe it's got some sort of resistance, because otherwise, normally, we'd be rocking like a 96% chance to crit per shot with Val.
Naturally.
But it's fine. Let's get Heinrichs tucked in.
Moment of integrity. Go on.
Abby up next. Top off and try to keep it locked, though I'm honestly not sure it's working because it clearly went after multiple targets.
Victory is imminent. It will be done.
Fractured echoes beckon to star.
Or he's just generally indiscriminate. That's fair.
Me? If you insist, Lord Captain.
A fleeting moment of integrity.
I will do my duty.
I think we're about to hit that 3/4 threshold. Let's see what happens. Actually takes damage from that. Good to know.
The threads of progress unraveling.
Thanks, Nomos.
Opponents cannot damage a star.
Close, close. Full auto.
So it shall be.
Low momentum.
A prominence cannot damage a star.
Right, okay, so he just summons more. Only slightly tougher ones this time. Structuring shard copies instead of fading. And now you're resistant again. actually. Oh, it's different kinds of shards, I see. Alright, well, I mean, unless he really hits us with a curveball. It's really just a battle of attrition from here. I think we can speed this up a bit.
I'll make it happen.
Alright, Pask, stop blowing yourself up, please. Thanks, Omos. Final batch, down to our last 3. Oh, scratch that. That is more than 3. There are more than 3.
Integrity.
Just a minor setback.
Oh, I don't like that. That's what he did to Kalkazar. Get out of there, Abby! And we're good. Val for the win. He is, after all, the prodigal son. The ancient monster struggles against the energy manacles of the oak. Its impossible powers that make reality itself burst at the seams are now being forced into a compact dungeon, quark by quark, returning it to a cruel and painful non-existence in the moment. It could struggle harder, but something is hindering it. You are the cause of these hindrances. Only now does the Catan Shard turn its focus to you. For the battle was nothing more than the reflexive resistance of an alien mind, absorbed in a completely different range of thoughts and responses. But now it is thinking about you, and its thoughts are so corporeal that you can sense them and know them. It seeks an end to the confrontation. It is capable of resolving it in a way that would benefit all. More and more tears appear all over the shard's form. As the yoke absorbs its power, it becomes increasingly harder for the shard to maintain its physical structure. Each imperfection you inflict brings the star predator closer to imprisonment. Do not bow your head before our abominable precursor. It was begotten by the dark abysses of the past. It is a fragment of that which devoured stars and erased civilizations. It knows no benefit other than its own. Allow us to stand against it. This is our time, our impossible chance. Hello. As yet another layer of reality cracks, a figure appears before you. Her. After giving you a probing and appraising look, Theodora permits herself a slight smile. Theodora, it's been a long time. Particles of reality around you begin to boil, trying to heal the wound upon existence and preventing her from entering your version of reality. You and she can exchange words, thoughts, glances, but a physical connection is an impossibility. You are merely fleeting phantoms that could scatter at any moment. She is silent, her gaze still trained on you, as if she is trying to commit your every feature to memory. You know, you and Kalkazar, two sides of the same coin. You both got a lot of people killed trying to fulfill your grand designs, including yourselves. After all that, tell me, was it worth it? Her smile widens. It is always worth it. You will understand this yourself. Hey, fair enough. The wound on reality is healed, and the vision of Theodora quickly fades. You catch her last words. Whatever fate you choose, one can only hope it will be better than mine. Mental contact with the Catan is effortless. This is not communication. Such a powerful being cannot comprehend communicating with anyone but its equals. It simply bears the gift of making the other hear and understand it. So grand is the potential of its thoughts. The Catan is a pinnacle of reality. It is eternity, dominance, omnipotence, individuality. The Catan is the original purpose behind all existence. The rest was born in order to contain, nourish, and be appropriated by the Catan. To the Catan, space is an illusory variable. To the Catan, time is a young and trivial phenomenon, for it existed for an eternity in the gaseous energy fount of the universe before time was eventually born. To the Catan, fact and probability are mere obstructions, between which it can soar on its electromagnetic wings. Currently, the Catan is not whole. It was shattered into lesser pieces, and so were its thoughts and powers. The feeling of emptiness is oppressive, and it yearns to become one again. You hear a whisper from Pascal's Vox.
I know this feeling, Xenos.
The Catan wishes to be. All Catan exists to spread and conquer, not to stay manacled within untime, where it was entombed by the contemptible sentient tools, away from all that is. The Catan wishes to ascend, sate its hungers, and embrace once more the pure exhilaration of claiming and taming reality. It promises power, eternity, comprehension. The Catan once chose to reign over the short-lived races and forged a new and glorious fate for them. It has learned from its mistakes. Now it will only bestow its gifts upon the chosen few. The Catan can grant... Your thoughts falter, for it is difficult for your mind to fathom the full scope of this word. The Catan can grant everything. It is much easier for you to stop trying to comprehend the Catan than for it, one who can grasp the world in hundreds of ways, to stop comprehending you. Nomos. If our birth ever had a purpose, then it is here and now. Right, but why do you call this thing your precursor? Are you also a shard? Yes, that is what it is, and what we are. We have told you before about Theodora's ambition, Amarnot's mind, the ship's cradle, and Epitaph's secret. One sprouted into another and spurred yet another. Thus, Nomos were born. We were but an echo of the shard's power, an echo that left its prison. But we have become something so much more. With your help. And what exactly are you planning to do? What are we waiting for? I will clash with the precursor, touch it, absorb it, so that the reflection becomes the object reflected, so that the shard becomes Nomos. Then and only then will its threat be eradicated forever. Are you sure you can do this, Nomos? What if it doesn't work? We stand at the threshold of probabilities and outside the bounds of the predictable. It is beyond possible to know whether we can or cannot. But we believe that we can, and that is what drives us to try. And if we succeed, we will obtain power beyond compare. We will become a shield against any threat, in whatever form it may manifest itself. Interesting. Okay, so in a lot of ways, basically the same thing that Kalkazar planned, only via actual legitimate respect and cooperation, as opposed to violence and imprisonment. All right, Nomos. Sounds like the choice has already been made. You can sense the shard's reaction, observation, analysis, and an almost intangible anxiety. If you're waiting for permission, then consider it granted. Godspeed, Nomos. We are ready for the most important battle of our life. Wish us luck. Nomos steps toward the shard, and the whole world explodes into a terrifying whirlwind. You can hear the colors and see the touches. Ice burns in your hands while fire leaves you freezing. And in the midst of this madness, you can clearly sense a battle raging, a clash of two beings, one endlessly ancient and the other endlessly young. The power of the Catan Shard is such that it redefines the very notion of power. But it has a weakness. One that you can see only now with the Shard and its rival standing face to face. The Shard is just that. A Shard. It is incomplete. It is not whole. And it cannot be what the Catan was before. What opposes the Shard is something entirely different. An undivided, sentient being with a clear purpose in mind, akin to a well-aimed arrow. And the one who fletched and loosed this arrow was you. The battle goes on and on and on, outrunning the course of time. But you do not need the gift of clairvoyance to know who will emerge victorious. Hey, and it's over. That's it. All but the epitaph. Let's see what the future holds, shall we? The Catan Shard was transmuted into a new form, and their name was Nomos. Possessing the power of an ancient being and nurtured by the rogue trader, the young star god watched over the Coronis Expanse, their new domain, with curiosity. Gathering its bleeding worlds together again, the rogue trader dared to build something more noble and civilized in the Expanse. a haven for those drifting and unprotected in the strict hierarchy of the Imperium. It would be an unbound frontier, where freedom and compassion were not wholly extinct. The shackled monster under von Valancius's control ensured the survival of the fledgling utopia. The Star God destroyed all who threatened its peaceful civilians and instilled fear in those of little faith. The Expanse tasted the sweet fruit of freedom and tolerance with reverent fear. The Imperium could not forgive such insolent deviation from the order prescribed by Holy Terra. The von Valancius dynasty was accused of the seditious formation of their own empire. An invasion fleet gathered in the Calixi sector, and the lifespan of the young utopia was as short as its creators. Protecting the young kingdom of freedom, Nomos created dimensional barriers that cut the Coronis Expanse off from the Imperium more soundly than the Great Rift. The humanity of the Expanse was left in isolation. Relying only on themselves, they either had to build something new and different from the Imperium, or fall to the horrors lurking in the darkness. The ideals that Valen von Valancius was committed to were alien to the Imperium, but close to the hearts of many in the Expanse. Anyone who could not resolve a dispute or who was denied justice rushed to the palace of the rogue trader in search of mercy. Rumors and stories of his humanitarian rule formed the foundation of the Valancian school of philosophy. The sect united commoners and aristocrats in the belief that, for the Imperium to flourish, it should stop seeing its subjects as mere tools. This dangerous heresy was denounced in many systems, but persecutions only hardened and multiplied its followers. Having learned a bitter lesson on footfall, Incendia Corda let go of her fanatical zeal. Relinquishing the reins of power, she secluded herself on a cloister world. The time of purges passed, and with it, the time of law and order. In the power vacuum that followed, the dark legacy of the abominable Aspis reared its ugly head, and Incendia's dominion gradually devolved into a nest of criminals and pirates. Wow, she really does not do things in moderation, does she? I feel like she could have at least handed her sectors off to me. I could have taken care of them. Resisting the temptations that besieged him, Caligos Winterscale returned to his domain and began to piece together the shattered remnants of his protectorate. Until his dying day, his actions and thoughts were dedicated to saving abandoned worlds and protecting survivors. Alas, he was not able to achieve much in the time he was allotted. He breathed his last breath on the same throne that he refused to leave for decades, adamantly refusing augmetics that would restore mobility and power to his legs. See, now that's a guy who actually learned from his life experiences and then used it in a responsible manner. I can respect that. Thanks to the patronage of the von Valancius dynasty, the cult of St. Drusus was successful in spreading its influence across the Expanse. Overshadowed, the cults of other saints lost their followers and faced a harsh choice: slip into obscurity or swear allegiance to the ideals of Drusus the warrior. After the death of Reverend Hieronymus Delaroso, a man called Chaplain took over the leadership of the Drusian mission. He hid his name, but not his crimes or his piratical past. With the resolve of an experienced voidfarer, he steered the cult, and even led his fellow believers on military expeditions against brigands, enforcing order and converting depraved captives to the faith. The deals struck by the Cognizance fleet and the von Valancius dynasty replenished the Explorator's dwindling supplies, and allowed them to re-embark on a rapid and unrelenting expansion campaign. With powerful bases established in the Expanse, the Omnissiah's scouts bravely ventured forth toward unnamed stars with the same drive that propelled their ancestors to explore the Expanse itself. The schism of discontinuing the cycle engulfed the entire Cognizance fleet, and soon the Civil War was over. Disregarding the commandments of their forefathers, the explorators started down a dangerous path of new comprehension, creation, and revision of procedures and algorithms. The fleet was united once more, and in its unity, it was ready to stare down any horrors standing in the way of the catechism of maintenance and operation. Magos Dominus Opticon 22, one of the first to hail the return of the Messiah, took the helm of the Mother Squadron of the Cognizance fleet, unquestioningly embracing the teachings of discontinuing the cycle. He personally saw to the crushing of any renegades who did not accept the Messiah's word as truth, and earned himself the identifier, Chrome Scourge. Profitable deals made between the Fellowship of the Void and the Von Valancius dynasty helped them subdue smaller brigand squadrons in the sector. Many worlds and stations saw the opening of Fellowship dens, in which grotesquely sincere pirate representatives took kickbacks from traders in exchange for safe passage. Naturally, the servants of the Von Valancius dynasty and the people under the rogue traders' protection were safe from the Fellowship of the Void's attacks. Mostly. The first command that Riza issued after her miraculous escape on Footfall was the complete extermination of all worshippers of the Dark Gods among the Fellowship of the Void. The old pirate wanted to find another way for her people to survive. The former renegades hoped to live by the law, working as mercenaries and traders. When it seemed they were finally on the path to a peaceful life, the Imperial Navy conducted a flash raid and destroyed all their ships. Those who survived the bloodbath were publicly hanged. Yeah, well, I mean, that's fair. Just because I gave them a pass doesn't mean that everyone did. Honestly, the Expanse is probably better off without the Fellowship anyway. The Kaspelika mission thrived on the riches it acquired in its deals with the rogue trader. The organization expanded to new markets, built up a mercenary army and fleet, and was ready to defend the legitimacy of its business from the authorities. Those foolish enough to deny it that right died quick, brutal, and unexplained deaths. Bladain Tokara, as Liege of Footfall, survived 14 assassination attempts and thwarted no less than 2,000 schemers before a shot finally took his life. The esteemed Liege's funeral was held in great secrecy, with only his closest entourage being permitted to view his corpse, which spawned some peculiar rumors. A multitude of agreements bound the Imperial Navy to the Von Valancius dynasty. Captains were eager to patrol the Protectorate, knowing they would be richly rewarded. Competing ships were lost to pirate attacks and subjected to harsh inspections. Many officers quietly entered the dynasty's service, receiving a salary and title in exchange for their excellent skills. Worthy admirals valued their new friends and enjoyed more gold on their uniforms. Oh, interesting. You know, that does somewhat recolor the Imperial Navy's decision to wipe out the Fellowship, just as they were going legit. Though again, they were former pirates, so I can't even really be mad about it. I mean, of all of our allies, I think the Fellowship were always the most tenuous. The ones Valen perhaps tolerated the least. Chartist Captain Asterius Thorfast founded the Thorfast and Companions Merchant Company, excelling in trade and acquiring a substantial escort fleet. After 3 decades, he traveled to the Maw to return to the Imperium in hopes of obtaining the fabled Warrant of Trade. It is not known how this venture ended. Oh, Thorfast, buddy. I mean, considering our own status with the Imperium, that was maybe not the best idea, but you know, good luck. When the rogue trader's apostasy became apparent, the Imperial Navy fulfilled its duty and fought the Von Valancius dynasty. The Battle of Dargonis ended in resounding defeat, and the surviving ships fled to distant systems. Disheartened but not broken, the captains vowed to rebuild their force and planned raids into the apostate territory, which could also explain the raid on the Fellowship. It is a bit weird because they're like jumbling up the timeline a lot here, but I think you can more or less make sense of it. You just have to shuffle things around a bit. The crucial reason for the defeat was the extraordinarily high percentage of captains who betrayed their oaths and defected to the rogue trader's side. Overnight, he acquired a battle-ready fleet of his own. Dargonis grew and prospered until it became the capital of the Coronis Expanse. The planet was like a giant magnet whose pull held together the worlds of the Expanse, absorbing the treasures and vices of the sector. Humanity was exploring the Expanse, and Dargonis became the capital for the brave starfarers and pioneers. It was from here that expeditions departed into the uncharted wilderness, and here they returned, bearing wondrous trophies. Captains, cartographers, and scribes flocked here to exchange news. Hiava Gamma washed off the stain of its former defilement, but not the dark memory of it. The sacred halls were never silent, and production rates became the supreme law. The glory of the Imperium was forged in the blood and sweat of its toilers, and the millstones of the manufactorums ground the workers down by the thousands. Even in death, the souls of its servants dared not step away from their machines. The enthroned Null Caliph drew millions of pilgrims and granted the planet hallowed status. Its sacred calculation continued for centuries, and the foremost sages of the Adeptus Mechanicus traveled to the world so they could attempt to divine its meaning. Oh, right, yeah, the like artificial intelligence that was developing fractal data angels. Wow, that's a pretty deep cut. Janus was conquered, the Xeno spirits were exorcised, and the wilderness was subdued. The fields grew until they covered the entire planet, and billions of tons of provisions were harvested there. Janus had become the breadbasket of the Expanse, and to threaten it would be to condemn millions to starvation. Janus became a melting pot for cultures from hundreds of worlds, taking in refugees from across the entire Expanse in its darkest hour. It became a stronghold and a symbol of hope. After the crisis passed, the refugees started to return to their home planets and to claim the lost worlds, thus earning Janus the proud name, the home of the Reconquista. Despite grim expectations, the coexistence of humans and the Aldari did not lead to enmity. Janus had faced many trials, and the struggle against them brought the two peoples together. They did not develop an affection for one another, but they learned to speak with no weapons in their hands. More than one dangerous xenophile schism was born on Janus. The mines of Viabo 6 grew deeper and deeper, and soon the planet became the darkest and most frightening colony of the Expanse, the final stop for the exiled and the damned. The brutal, hardened inhabitants of the Death World feared neither humans nor xeno-horrors, knew no mercy, and were known as the most fearsome fighters in the sector, who had traded their lives for the right to leave the eternal darkness of the mines. Guarded, luxurious palaces were built under the climate domes, shrouded by clouds of poison. They housed so many powerful blackguards, persecuted aristocrats, and wealthy scoundrels that Viabo 6 gained unimaginable political influence. Such grand and sinister deeds were done there that before long, the grim Death World was spoken of as the new political center of the Expanse. No longer secluded and forlorn, Foulstone turned into the spiritual center of the Expanse, clad in gold and power. Rulers went there to be anointed for greatness, criminals for penance, and the righteous for encouragement, and there was no end of them in sight. Converted into a comet shrine, Foulstone's moon spread the word of St. Cognatius throughout the Expanse, protecting worlds from attacks by the enemies of humanity. Its servants asked for neither money nor power, but only the relics left by their blessed patron. The wise handed them over with reverence, while the haughty learned how heavy the hammer of Foulstone was. The fate of the pure-voiced prophet, guardian of the hallowed crucible, was a sad one. After visiting 7 worlds and bestowing the blessings of transformation upon them, he perished at the hands of bloodthirsty Drukhari pirates, along with his retinue and the priceless relic. Yeah, I guess that was inevitable. Helped 7 planets, arguably worth it. With the fall of their unholy patron, the Edge of Daybreak, the cult of the Final Dawn perished as well. Every cell of the cult was hunted down and eliminated. Rumors that some worshippers of the ruinous powers had managed to get away, hiding the writings of their warp-banished lord under their robes, were baseless. Left without a mission or a leader, the word-bearers retreated to the depths of the Immaterium. Their last act of vengeance was a bloody assault on Footfall. The populace of several asteroids were exterminated or enslaved, and the statue of the God Emperor was badly damaged. After recovering from Corda's regime, Footfall reclaimed its status as the trading hub of the Expanse. Having learned a bitter lesson, Vladame Tokara created the Footfall Partisans Militia, a well-equipped mercenary army that answered only to him. A modicum of order returned to the station. The changes that the Von Valancius dynasty brought to Footfall endured on the station long after. Poorhouses opened by the order of the Rogue Trader saved many hungry and homeless from death. Unfortunately, this disrupted the station's delicate ecosystem, no longer freezing to death in empty compartments or tormented by epidemics. Those who lived in poverty on Footfall began to choke the station, leading to a sharp rise in crime. Organ traders, illegal augmetic specialists, and savage gangs of anvers proliferated. I mean, I feel like that's what security forces are for, like that militia Vladame just founded. The Rykad system turned into a purulent wound of corruption, poisoning the Expanse. The surreal energies of the yawning Warp Legion held its planets together, even in the absence of the gravitational pull of the star, defying the very laws of existence. Immense depravity took root on Rykad Minoris, and it poured out into other systems with vile glee. The people of Rykad Minoris, saved by the Rogue Trader, eventually found a new home. The colony of New Rykad was founded at the edge of the Von Valancius domain. Sadly, the world's inhabitants mostly consisted of high-born nobles, with very few serfs. Not willing to sully their hands with manual labor, the aristocrats started buying up pirate captives. Soon, New Rykad became the favored safe haven for void outlaws. Wow, a lot of outlaws out there, I guess, beneath Nomos' notice. In memory of this world and all who perished on its surface, or met a fate worse than death, construction began on the orbital slipways of Footfall of a glorious cathedral ship to be called Rykad Sacrifice. The miraculous fusion reactor powered its engines and cannons, fueling them with the fierce power of the motive force. All the best minds in the service of House Von Valancius took up the study of Tesserdium. Numerous uses were soon found for the natural psi focus, but the jubilation was short-lived, as a series of major warp breaches in Tesserdium export destinations put an end to any and all goodwill toward the research. people began zealously destroying anything that remotely resembled the mineral. However, a few exceptionally strong psychers managed to bend the sinister rock to their will, magnifying their sorcerous powers several-fold and turning them into a force that the Expanse has had to reckon with ever since. Yeah, really should have just trashed that stuff and been done with it. I'll own that one. Rumors of the rotting remains of an Aeldari craft world spread around the Expanse. Explorators, privateers, Kasperlika agents, and anyone hungry for easy money all rushed to the frontier systems to vie for a piece of the prize. Some were swallowed by the warp, while others perished in skirmishes with their rivals. The most skilled and fortunate returned empty-handed after decades of searching. The colossal ship, as big as an imperial world, simply vanished, as if it had never existed. But the legend of the forbidden treasure lived on, and continued to bring daring souls to ruin. Aeldari from the fallen craft world Kruderok, who once traveled through the darkness of the Expanse in a desperate attempt to gather the remains of their kind, were becoming a rarer sight. Even the most skillful Kasperlika agents and audacious bounty hunters, with knowledge of Xenos settlements on the edge of the Expanse, could no longer find their trail. Squads of Aeldari rangers suddenly appeared on different worlds, and disappeared abruptly without shedding a drop of blood. Their purpose remained an enigma. The news of Xenos appearing in the Expanse was followed by a report from the agri-world Janus about a strange flash in the night sky. When the light disappeared, authorities sent out patrols that located a Xenos camp among ancient ruins. Their trail ended near a white monument, a webway gate. Where this path led the Aeldari, only their Farseers know. Time spent on the same world as Monkey pushed the Farseer Moran toward reflection. When the webway gate awoke on Janus, and squads of Aeldari rangers stepped onto their ancestors' world, he averted a bloodbath, granting the Lelathan and its new and naive citizens his blessing. He disappeared through a shining portal, departing for a new home. The spirit monolith, purified by the Harlequin troop on the Crone world, was hidden from the insatiable eyes of the Monkey by raging warp storms. Ships started going missing more frequently in the systems close to the planet. Even the most courageous captains gave the region a wide berth, and it was named the Damned Reefs. Somewhere in the underside of reality lay Camorra, woven from manifold other dimensions and illuminated, as always, by the light of stolen suns. Its street ever filled with screams and agony. Any misfortune experienced by the Dark City became another scar on its appalling face, lost amongst thousands of other vile blemishes. As long as pain pulsed in its blood-soaked spires, the insatiable and unshakable Camorra continued its flight through the webway, along with its unchanging ruler, the leader of the Cabal of the Black Heart, and the most dangerous of all Drukhari, Asdrubal Vect. After the rogue trader's visit, dimensional rifts opened around the spire of the Reaving Tempest, flooding the streets of Camorra with demons. This incursion terrified Camorra. The Cabal of the Black Heart managed to stop it, but some Archons saw the event as a sign of their leader's weakness. Others interpreted it as a grim omen for the entirety of the Dark City. The fall of the Cabal of the Reaving Tempest united Camorra for a brief and bloody moment. The elites of the Dark City set their squabbles aside and found a new game in tearing apart the domain of Archon Euremeris. The fate of the Reaving Tempest reminded the other Cabals that nothing lasts forever in the Dark City, save the city itself. As they were leaving the Necron system, Nomos destroyed every tomb world of the ancient Xenos, Some eternal strife had awakened within the young deity, demanding that the planets of the undead be obliterated. Yeah, that's probably fine. Following the destruction of Lethis, rogue trader von Valancius directed part of its tide toward restoring Coronis Expanse worlds that had suffered from Xenos, heretics, and the horrors of the Void. Many of them only survived thanks to that aid, although the broad gesture was met with scant understanding by aristocrats. Some years later, the worlds to which the tithe had been distributed were struck by a ghastly disease that came to be known as the Lethis Curse. Whether it truly was related to the tithe or a mere attempt to slander the Expanse's protector forever remained a mystery. Interesting. Not sure what would have caused that. The voice of Voxmaster Vigdis Suri Atta of the Ptoleman dynasty has long resounded in the Expanse, bringing hope and trumpeting the arrival of the merciful rogue trader. Known for her wisdom and acute understanding of ship systems, over her long life she taught many generations of future Voxmasters from the Ptoleman dynasty. Her body was built into the bridge itself, and in times of need her voice flowed through the Vox, dispelling delusions and despair. After years of dedicated service, Master Helmsman Ravor was granted, despite his objections, the privilege of rest. The wise servants of the Omnissiah implanted an augment into his brain that restored his ability to sleep. Soon afterward, something unprecedented happened aboard the ship. The Master Helmsman overslept and missed the start of his watch, but his temper did become much more agreeable from then on. Hey, congratulations, bud. Rest in peace. Many years later, High Factotum Janris Stanrock sought permission to retire. He said that age had softened his heart, and that a more worthy, young, and assertive successor should take over his position. There was no shortage of candidates. Under all that fat, Danrock had a sentimental heart. He spared nothing for the orphans of those who had died serving the rogue trader. The children were given an excellent education and were eager to serve the von Valancius dynasty. Jocasta Sourback served as master-at-arms for years, but eventually her zeal faded. It appeared that, having tried every form of violence in existence, she no longer derived out of any of them the joy it had once held. Jocasta humbly submitted her resignation and went back to her home on the capital world. She took up the position of the warden of one of the capital world's hives and reconciled with her cousin Macarius, albeit only after a while. The reconciliation was, at any rate, easy to overlook during gatherings of capital world nobility, where Jocasta and Macarius would waste no opportunity to have a ferocious row. After many years, Zachary Wise mustered the courage to take personal apprentices again. He searched throughout the Expanse for astropaths whose masters were harsh and cruel to them, and recruited them into his choir. He gathered a cast of talented men and women by his side, and was their guardian and mentor. Wise died defending his wards from cursed words spewed by the Immaterium. Sealing the sound of those words in his mind, he preferred a horrible death to a repetition of his shameful past mistake. The former prefect was sentenced to tithe accounting duty for the rest of her life. For several years she inhabited a tiny room stacked with papers, until one day she felt the life going out of her withered body. She assembled her few subordinates and meticulously handed over her various responsibilities. Her final words were, "This completes the reading of the list. Rank 2 clerk, Inscribia Voltur, is hereby stepping down for death-related reasons." You know, I know she tried to kill us, but I just have to respect that sort of dedication to procedure. High Overseer Gregorus Strax of Viabos 6 rendered his duties with a zeal unfathomable to the common mind. Under his leadership, the penal world became a paragon of order and a place of incarceration that criminals feared more than death. Strock spent his final years in a small, damp room, disturbingly reminiscent of a jail cell. He declined every award and honor for his assiduous service, and preferred solitude to any kind of company. You know, that's a pretty fun dichotomy. A prison strictly run below, a place that criminals dread being sent to, but then also dotted with higher-placed, poison-shrouded palace domes. You know, the home to the politically inscrutable. Almost poetic. The only exception was Solomorn Anthar, who visited his former superior whenever he had the chance. The contents of their long conversations are unknown, but their outcome was the same every time. A gloomy and unmistakable mark of regret on each of the two dour men's faces. Urban Drivestem cared more about preserving the influence of his line than the well-being of the Protectorate. His blind ambition lost him his governor's seat and the respect of his family. Within a few generations, one of the largest houses of Dargonis turned into an obscure family of petty aristocrats. Yeah, that tracks. I mean, bit of a shame because he was ultimately loyal in the end, but also self-serving. Toriana Gotprock missed the moment when her family, which had previously functioned like a well-oiled machine, started to fall apart, racked by infighting. Among her distant relatives, many blamed Toriana for the Kiava Gamma disaster. Soon, the Gotprock family splintered into warring factions and spent centuries locked in a violent struggle, only occasionally punctuated by futile attempts to reunite the house. Macarius Sourback was loyal to the rogue trader to the last, despite all the rumors to the contrary. Finding little affection amongst his subjects or family, he stayed true to himself, remaining a forthright, severe, and pious person. Macarius strived to ensure that every soul in his charge felt justifiable dread before both him and the God Emperor. Members of House Wersurian served the dynasty faithfully and loyally, amassing more and more power. A century later, they had finally gained the respect enjoyed by other noble houses. Yet power and luxury can dull any blade. The now pampered and idle aristocrats were scarcely recognizable as the descendants of the formidable Seneschal Wersurian. Clementia Wersurian, granddaughter of Abelard and Chancellor of Dargonis, executed her duties irreproachably and even found time to school the younger generations of her family. She was an equally skilled mentor, chancellor, and political operative. After a century of immaculate service, she surprised everyone by leaving her position and becoming the first mate on a trade ship. She would later admit, like a true Wersurian, that she had always had a passion for ships and voidfaring. Branches of House Gotprock and Wersurian were intertwined for a time after the marriage of Astarsha and Vicent. To the great sadness of the couple and the great amusement of the spiteful Dargonis nobility, their marriage produced no children. Just like her ancestors, Astarsha Wersurian Gotprock dedicated her life to service. Crushed by the events that shook the stability of his house and his inability to provide an heir, Vicent lived in his wife's shadow. When his time came, he passed away without notice. I mean, that's very sad, but I met the guy once. Also, does adoption not exist in this universe? The Harlequin, known as Nocturne of Oblivion, visited the Expanse once again. Sneaking onto Dargonis, he came to the rogue trader's palace and left him a special gift. A case of Eldari crafting, unmistakably ancient and precious, adorned with a rune of an eye inside a triangle. Only the Lord Captain knew what it contained. The Harlequin candidly warned him that he was drawing the von Valancius dynasty into a deadly dance, a shaking doom, that all will freeze within the threads of terror's loom." Then he promptly departed, and not without reason. A few hours later, assassins from the Dark City appeared, following his trail, and were mercilessly killed. Their armor bore the sign of the Cabal of the Black Heart. After months of searching, Dargonis wardens found the remains of Achilles Scalander on the lowest levels of the hive. Drukhari artifacts and records discovered beside him indicated that the agent of the Inquisition had been compromised and was working for the Xenos. Maeve settled into life aboard the flagship surprisingly quickly, and her kindness and gentle nature touched the hearts of the crew. One dashing officer made his romantic interest known, but Maeve spurned his advances, hiding behind high collars and shawls, the disfiguring marks of the dark ritual that had taken place on Thasara. When Maeve's suitor at last secured her consent to marry, little did he know that he was walking into a blood-soaked nightmare. Just before the ceremony, his bride-to-be transformed into a chaos spawn. To the cries of horror and despair, the creature gorged itself on shattered hopes, until it was slain by the arriving enforcers. It is said that as the creature lay bleeding, it tried to sing a surprisingly tender tune, and called out to someone named Dane. That's a bummer, but also I guess it does kind of track. She was right in the middle of a pretty major bit of chaos sorcery. I mean, honestly, the only reason we survived intact was likely because of the patronage of the Edge of Daybreak, who at that point was still hoping that they could tempt us. I mean, look, I'd love for her to get a happy ending, but also I know that they have to hit their requisite grimdark quota. This is 40k. So yeah, sorry, Maeve. The old slith, Malice, did not risk returning to Camorra, where the cult of the Fatal Thirst was exacting vengeance on everyone who had helped the rogue trader. He took to piracy, forming a crew from the remnants of the Reaving Tempest. Rekindling his old thirst for battle, he seemed to shed a good 100 years off his age, like a snakeskin. Hey, good for you. Just maybe stay away from my protectorate, because otherwise I will have to kill you. The Expanse is full of strange stories, yet one of the most bizarre tales emerged in the wake of the rogue trader von Valancius's rise to prominence. According to the legend, on every world the rogue trader visited, people or objects would suddenly vanish without a trace if they found themselves in the same room as a mirror, even an utterly ordinary one. Yeah, the mirror. Weird thing to give an epilogue to, but apparently the appropriate response on that one was to just do nothing and eventually people would reappear, but, you know, we shot it into space. The secret of the Gene Stealer cult infestation in the Coronis Expanse was laid bare. A wave of purges rolled across many worlds, with enraged rabble and planetary guards massacring thousands of those whose appearance diverged from true human form. Most of them were, of course, ordinary abject genetic misfits and luckless rejects, but their lives were a small price for the sector's purity. Having completed his last journey with his Lord Captain, Abelard Wersurian, with the gracious permission of the rogue trader, left his post as seneschal and took over the helm of his large family. House Wersurian rose above its rivals and was never again the target of persecution, even after their esteemed patriarch died decades later in his bed, surrounded by his loved ones. Abelard's shining memory was blighted only by rumors of a creeping madness in the twilight of his life. Many said they had seen the esteemed seneschal talking to someone unseen, in a voice filled with unusual tenderness and sorrow. Sorry, man. Yeah, that's an artifact of Camorra, the ghost of his dead wife. But, you know, all things considered, there are certainly worse fates. Sister Argenta made no secret of the great respect and gratitude she felt toward the Lord Captain, yet duty compelled her to leave von Valancius's retinue With the blessing of the Ecclesiarchy, she founded a minor order of the Adepta Sororitas, the Order of the One Star. United around the keeper of the sacred relic, its sisters protected the faithful from the dangers still lurking in the Expanse. The wider order and its courageous founder very quickly became heroes of legend, instilling hope and inspiration in the hearts of Terra's faithful children. Yet, the conflict between the Imperium and the head of the Von Valancius dynasty could not but affect the young order. Some sisters demanded that Argenta denounce her former commander. Unable to choose between the order she had created and the person without whom she could not have completed her journey, she stepped down from her position and went into exile. Despite everything, love for her among the people of the Expanse only grew. Argenta would be the heroine of songs and tales for centuries to come, a radiant angel who would appear in the darkest hour to protect innocence from the forces of darkness. Wow, solid ending for Argenta. I really expected something a bit more unhinged. The Mercatum Tabula Officiale unlocked a sea of possibilities for Jai Haydari. She left the Caspalica mission and became an independent agent. Choosing one's destiny was a unique gift that ordinary mortals would never dare dream of. But Jai was no ordinary mortal. She found new friends, skillfully danced along the knife's edge between trade and piracy, stole from the strong, granted mercy to the weak, and even bought a couple of modest planets. And she never, ever betrayed herself. Half a century later, her life was tragically cut short. A weak and little-known rogue trader dynasty, led by a young and ambitious leader, ambushed and captured Jai Haydari in order to appropriate her wealth. The Von Valancius fleet strike was lightning fast, but Mistress Haydari could not be saved. She died in the hands of her avaricious captors. See, I don't really feel like we need to go that far forward. 50, 100 years, sometimes further. They are just really intent on injecting a little extra downer into half these epilogues. Vizier Cabela of the Bloodspun Web guided her cult along its old paths and remained faithful to tradition. As before, Bloodspun Web cultists led ascetic lives and brought death to those who had been marked by the Undying One. However, nothing is unchanging. A momentous event profoundly impacted the Bloodspun Web: the discovery and miraculous return of a lost relic, a card from the Emperor's Tarot. The Vizier performed a reading, and the Emperor showed her a new goal: to put the blessed deck back together. Only in its entirety could it reveal the great and dark future that awaited the Coronis Expanse. The Bloodspun Web read the portents, and the holy search commenced. With her newly acquired power and resources, Jai Haydari expended a great deal of effort to put an end to the cult of the Bloodspun Web. The ease with which she sent assassins after the spinners and spread damning propaganda betrayed her strong, vested interest. Many thought her actions reckless and expected a retaliatory strike to be delivered before long, but it never came. With the cards of the Emperor's Tarot spread before her in the darkness, Vizier Cabela performed one reading after another, but as much as it troubled her, she could find no command to end the life of her brazen adversary. Thus, the blade remained sheathed. Oh, weird. Did they have some beef that I'm unaware of? I mean, I guess we never really had them in the same party all that much. Or perhaps it was meant to imply that she had possession of some of the Emperor's Tarot cards, and thus their search for it put them at direct odds. I'm a little unclear on that one. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was any point where they really interacted much at all. Mattis Erebus was a loyal and dutiful servant of the rogue trader. He went on to become an outstanding bridge officer and a true void wolf. He visited many systems and worlds in the Coronis Expanse, but never set foot on his native Dargonis or saw his family again. Well, yeah, they sold his sister, so, you know. Heinrich van Kalox, the former interrogator of the Ordo Xenos, took the mantle of the Lord Inquisitor after his mentor's death, receiving both the Inquisitor's rosette and the duty of defending the sector from the enemies of humanity. Van Kalox became the new warden of the Coronis Expanse. Hey, good for you. Though I imagine now we come into conflict because I am an apostate. That one feels somewhat predictable. Van Kalox declared a relentless war against the enemies of humanity, be they Xenos, servants of chaos, or heretics in the Imperium's own ranks. The Inquisitor fearlessly eliminated numerous nests of corruption in the Expanse. A few decades later, he was assassinated by a criminal cartel. Some say the Kaspelika mission, sick of the unrelenting servant of the law, was involved in the Inquisitor's killing. Oh, okay. I mean, I'm not happy he's dead, but I'm surprised. Despite scandalous rumors about a love affair with a rogue trader, Lady Navigator Cassia continued to accompany her lover among the stars of the Expanse for a time. Their love was delicate and selfless. The Lord Captain and the Lady Navigator wordlessly understood and accepted each other's feelings. Even after Cassia ascended the throne as Novator, she spurned all claims on her hand and heart, remaining loyal to her first and only love. As the years passed, mutations transformed her body, but the bond between the Lord Captain and the Lady Navigator endured, and they continued to find solace and consolation in each other. Aw, that's sweet. I like that. In her journeys with the rogue trader, Cassia Orselio experienced all the hardships and delights of the galaxy. The invaluable experience and new knowledge helped her to finally conquer her fears and accept herself and her powers. The Lady Navigator became Novator of her house, tasked with addressing the consequences of Tisiphane's rule and the chaos that followed her disappearance. For the duration of her reign, she patiently worked on uniting the feuding branches of the house, forging alliances and expanding the influence of House Orselio. The Starway Atlas, which contained the memories of Tisiphone and the Sethala clan, lost its power. House Orselio's navigators once again had to rely on skill alone in the depths of the Immaterium. Many lost their lives, but those who survived the crisis became hardened veterans and pillars of the house. Most of those fortunate souls were young and brave. Too few among them were old and wise. Adira Talas lived several more years after the rogue trader's grand campaign on Epitaph. Despite her short life, she left behind many legends and tales of her adventures in the Lord Captain's service, and of the terrible warp phenomena that she manifested. At a time when Adira Talas was preparing to accept her fate, she found guidance where she least expected it, in the wisdom of the blood-spun web. The words of Azir Cabela, who had come to know death better than any mortal soul, helped Adira look to her future not without regret, but without fear. For many years afterwards, there was an empty table in the common area of the officer's deck that had an intricate labyrinth carved into the tabletop. None of the crew sat at the table out of respect for the quiet and candid conversations once shared at it by a psyker and a servant of the undying Emperor. Oh, that's nice too. You know, never really saw much interaction between them either, but I guess it does thematically make sense. Adira would be the first of us fated to die given her condition, something which Cabela would be finely attuned to. Shortly before her death, Adira vanished from her post. Jai disappeared with her. When Jai returned, many cycles later, she declared that Adira's last days had been full of joy and adventure, and that her greatest pleasure had been watching the Void Whales play. Oh, that's sweet too. Jai and Cabela coming in clutch. Shame they couldn't get along with each other, but at least they teamed up to help Adira. On announcing the discontinuing of the cycle, the Ammernaut Collective instilled terror in the hearts of those who revered the theorems of purity. But it gave hope to others. After gathering its disciples and recruiting servo-soldiers from vassal planets, it ventured to the worlds of the Screaming Vortex and to the infernal forges of the Dark Mechanicus. This march of re-indoctrination was meant to seize the stolen secrets of the Omnissiah from the hands of the heretics, temper the cult in the fires of battle, and transform it into a tool for both eradication and comprehension. The fleet disappeared into the darkness, and only rare echoes of its astropathic messages were ever intercepted. The unit Abel Hanuman continued his service to the Ammernaut Collective. In unity with 5 companion minds, he rediscovered the joy of direct cognitive communication, unmarred by inborn otherness. While outwardly silent, he joyfully described the images, concepts, and ideas that the Omnissiah revealed to him. Fulfilling his function, he overflowed with the exaltation of efficiency. For many long years, Juliet traveled at the rogue trader's side, helping him decipher the secrets of lost Xenos races and lending him the wisdom of her kind. Half a century later, she sensed that it was time to say goodbye. The path of the outcast had come to an end. After bidding farewell to her Ellentalk, Juliet made her way to her surviving kin. Juliet followed a new path, the path of the warrior. She only hoped that she would never be forced to raise her weapon against the mortals who had become her true brothers and sisters in arms. Rumor has it that Juliet and Pascal met again among the alien stars. A band of Aldari warriors were trying to protect an ancient planetary edifice of their people from the covetous servants of the Omnissiah. Upon learning that Juliet was leading the Xenos, Pascal personally descended to the planet and struck down his former comrade in arms. Her death did not stir any feelings in his metallic heart. Well, that's a bummer, but yeah, also completely makes sense. I was worried that turning back into Ammernaut would have these sorts of effects on Pascal in the long run. And, you know, he did say some pretty concerning things here and there. Rest in peace, Juliet. But at least we know it's at least 50 years in the future, so, you know. Again, had a good run. Plus, yeah, we also had kind of pegged that the whole Path of the Warrior thing just sounded like a bad idea. After becoming marshal several years later, Solomor Nanthar began to reform the laws of the Expanse, seeking to imbue them with a spirit of justice. His approach led to a several-fold increase in workload for the Adeptus Arbitis. Solomor's solution to this was to assemble a so-called Lex Imperialis militia, which recruited only the most honorable subjects of the Imperium. This, in turn, resulted in a conflict between the original Arbitis and Marshal Anthar, which escalated into a war that went on for decades and claimed hundreds of lives. Okay, I mean, hundreds of lives is kind of a drop in the bucket as far as 40k is concerned. Abelard Wersurian and Solomorn Anthar spent most of their infrequent meetings playing Regicide, to which the Seneschal had introduced the Proctor. Meticulously recorded by Abelard's adjutant, their games soon found their way into collections of the best ones ever played in the Expanse, and were later referenced by many a noble Regicide aficionado. When First Officer Wersurian passed away before he could finish the last match in a long series of draws, Solomorn attended his funeral in full dress and regalia, and placed a Regicide piece on his grave. Duty demanded that Magos Hanuman and Marshal Anthar part ways. During their last meeting, Pascal made a few final modifications to Glado's design, increasing the Cybermastiff's service life several-fold. Whether the gift had any impact on Solomorn is uncertain, but on more than one occasion, having his faithful dog at his side would turn out to be his salvation in even the darkest of days. Oh, Pask, you old softy. Except for the Yurliet thing, kind of a mixed bag there. But that's nice. I wish we got more of that out of you. Though I do suspect things are just going to get worse. We've got Ulfar coming up. And Pask did swear vengeance on him. After witnessing the deeds of Marshal Anthar, Vizier Cabela asked the cards about his fate. The very next day, a spinner was assigned to him, tasked solely with protecting Solomorn from any and all assassination attempts. These were not long in coming, and the spinner's blade soon tasted the blood of heretics. For his part, the Marshal, after accidentally discovering that he had an invisible protector, had the spinner arrested and executed for multiple counts of murder. Wow, Kibbles just cannot catch a break. But, you know, it does make sense. After joining the Stormbiters, Ulfar Thunderlung soon became the pack leader, taking the place of Thorvald, who met an honorable end. The new leader sent a message to Fenris, stating his intention to remain in the Expanse. There were too many enemies yet lurking in these hunting grounds that deserved the Allfather's wrath. Legends paved the formidable pack's path in gold. Years later, Ulfar found a battle in which he could meet his honorable death. But the warp was suddenly torn asunder, and ships from Fenris, bearing the mark of the Wolfhead, came to his aid. Saved from the battlefield by his loyal companion Halbrand, Ulfar accepted the honors of the Dreadnought, and was entombed in sacred armor. During the blessed ritual, he cursed and demanded to be left to his death, but his brothers merely answered with mirthful laughter. When he recovered his senses, Ulfar led his forces to the heathen stars. The Allfather had given him a new mission in a near-death vision. No one in the Expanse has heard word of the Space Wolves since their departure. Yet many believe that one day they will return, victorious. Oh, okay. I mean, I guess that ended about as well as you could expect it to. No clash with Pask. Oh, hold on. It is rumored that the true cause of Thorvald Ironhide's demise was treachery. Faced with a superior enemy, the Space Wolves called on their allies for help, but a nearby squadron of the Cognizant's fleet withdrew, defiantly broadcasting that the blood debt to Archmagos Amernot is not forgotten. Okay, well that's better than the Yurliet thing. I mean, it's not Pascal directly, it's his people. Also a much more passive contribution to his death than just outright killing him. Such was the echo of the deeds of the rogue trader of House von Valancius. Deeds that transformed the Coronis Expanse and prepared it for events even darker and more violent. But those are the events of a different story. This one has come to an end. Oh, thank goodness. My throat is wearing out. The end. Wow, I mean, what can I say? 2 years and 213 episodes. Finally coming to an end. You know, it'll be strange not playing this game, at least for a while. I mean, obviously we've got the DLC coming up in Q2 and Q4, something like that. I'd have to double check. I don't think we have exact dates just yet. But we will revisit for those. We'll roll the clock back a bit and treat them as kind of like standalone side stories. I will say, you know, I've really been invested in finishing this series and making sure it actually got done despite its gargantuan length. Because it is a series that, when I first started it, it was right after my mother had passed, and I had the extended probate, the move. Stuff I don't talk about much these days. It was 2 years ago. And the series has been running pretty consistently ever since. And it is fitting that it ends now, because as I'm recording this, actually, I'm moving in just another few days to an actual house out of the temporary quote-unquote, apartment I moved into after my mother passed away, where I will presumably live for the rest of my life, and I can set up a proper recording studio again. And the series has also simultaneously come to an end. Overall, I've got to say, I really enjoyed it. I feel like the ending was okay. I feel like they did a good job of tying everything back together in the end. There's a lot of stuff that made sense as we got those final reveals. I don't think there's much in the way of, dangling plot threads, aside from, obviously, the stuff with Mars. I shot him, so we never got to see some of his particular involvement, which unfortunately would have also expanded upon the Drukhari involvement in the story. So, the fact that I cut him loose, although it made sense, obviously, and I don't really regret doing it, does mean we missed some of that context, which I would have liked to see. I'm just not sure it was worth keeping him alive for. Though I suppose we could have always handed him off to Heinrichs once we actually saw whatever he did have to offer. I think it just would have been hard to justify. It's like a what's-her-face situation from Wrath of the Righteous, the other companion that we axed. A character who is just too reprehensible for us to really wrangle an excuse for the main character to keep around. Sometimes I'll make that leap, just for the sake of content, for the sake of not shutting out future quests, like going out of my way to knock out the evil companion over in Baldur's Gate 3. But, then there are some characters that I just find too reprehensible to really make that exception for. Marazai, What's-Her-Face, and Wrath. A couple of characters in Wasteland 3. I think we killed 2. And jailed a 3rd. So, yeah. I don't necessarily regret killing Marazai. I just regret missing that story content. I do wish that we could have seen it. I think I would say, if there were anything that I had to complain about this game, aside from, I suppose, the lack of real challenge in most of the fights, combat is at its most interesting in the lower levels, before you get past that point where you're just outpacing all the enemies. I wasn't even using good builds in most cases. I was using mediocre builds at best, and we still ended up outpacing the enemies and just curb-stomping most of them, with the sole exception, perhaps, of our other dimensional clones. But honestly, I can live with that. I would like more engaging fights, but at the same time, it wasn't really what kept me playing the game. That was just the general narrative, all of the interwoven plot threads trying to speculate on where things were going, and then finally seeking closure to see how much we had actually gotten right in our speculation. But yeah, that does lead me to, I think, what my main complaint would be, which is that there was a lot of gated content, stuff you could only gain access to by using very specific characters or romancing specific characters. For example, I had to go out of my way to kind of force Argenta into our party for Act 3, because I knew if we didn't, we'd never find out who killed Theodora. That was the only way for it to be revealed. If you don't take her there and she doesn't have her, nervous breakdown, she never sees fit to confess that she did it, and you just never find out. It's left as a dangling plot thread, never resolved. Likewise with Marazai's stuff, you kill him, you don't get access to the extra Drukhari context about their involvement in all this. Heinrichs, you don't romance him, you don't get a lot of background details about Kalkazar's crew and his personal involvement with them. I had someone comment when we met Tanakia. She, in our game, got one name drop, I think, when we met Lady Emelina, during Heinrichs' personal quest. But apparently we would have found out a lot more about her, and just Heinrichs in general, and Lady Emelina, if we had been romancing him. Same with Jai, we never got full closure on her quest because we weren't romancing her. We broke it off, and thus we never got to meet the mysterious Mercy that seemed so intertwined with her particular tale. Rather, with us, her story ended once we killed Falco. And, I'm sure there's some other similar examples. But I think the gated context and plot stuff behind the romances bugs me more than gating content behind killing Marzai, because us not getting stuff from Marzai is fair. I shot him in the face. I get that when I did that, I blocked off certain routes. That is intuitive. But gating interesting content about characters behind their romance path feels counterintuitive, because, these were all introduced to us as inherently flawed and, in many cases, inherently unlikable characters, at least on their face, as they were when you first meet them. I feel like people would be more prone to get invested in them if they were able to get at least some of that context and backstory and whatnot to hint that there is more beneath the surface. Whereas with us, we bailed halfway through Jai's backstory and never really found out much about her. And with Heinrichs, of course, we never romanced him. And we just never found out anything about him. I mean, I'm glad he ended up siding with us in the end, but outside of his one personal quest with Lady Emelina and the one anecdote he told us in the bath, we never really found out much of anything about him outside of, the basic bridge banter. Likewise with Solomorn, and to an extent Yrliet, because, we broke our romance with Yrliet in Camorra when we balked at immediately forgiving her for the whole betrayal arc. And in doing that, we blocked ourselves off from finding out that apparently her soulstone was cracked, and now she's effectively dying, I guess? Which weirdly wasn't brought up in her epilogues, but I guess that's fine because she got pescalded instead. But yeah, she's just apparently, straight up dying after Camorra, and you only find out if you maintain an unwavering romance path with her to the point where you're willing to immediately forgive her for betraying you. I mean, kind of betraying you. It was less betrayal and more Yrliet making really terrible decisions, which is just kind of her dominant character trait, or just the Aldari's dominant character trait. But yeah, so she has this major character-altering event that you only find out about if you're romancing her, even though we also ended on good terms with her, and she spent 50 years with us afterwards in the epilogue. That is something that does kind of bug me, because otherwise I feel like the story was pretty well told. Owlcat has a fairly solid ability to juggle a dozen different plot threads, and eventually tie everything together in the end. I feel like they did the same with Kingmaker and Wrath, with very few dropped plot threads, aside from ones that get cut short by the player's actions, whether they know it or not, as opposed to certain other games that I also very much enjoyed, but did get much more frustrated with because of more blatantly cut content and unfinished storylines. Wasteland 3, for example. I will forever bellyache about that one. Really enjoyed it. It drops so many plot threads. They cut out 5, 6 major locations and still left plot hooks in for most of them. It is bonkers, but thankfully Rogue Trader was nowhere near as bad. I'd actually heard, I avoided spoilers as much as I could, but I heard that Act 5 did suffer from, your classic RPG rush to the finish line sort of deal. As the deadlines loom and the funding is running thin, developers often start cutting corners towards the end, trying to just ship the game already. And I honestly didn't feel like it was that bad. I've seen way, way worse, even in the previous Owlcat games. You go back to Kingmaker, and that game really starts showing towards the end that they were rushing to just get it done. But this felt more like a more complete package. It would have been nice if it were longer. But, then again, 213 episodes feels like plenty. We've been playing this game for 2 years. And I do hear that apparently DLC 3 might be expanding further on Act 5. Apparently it's Necron-centric, which makes sense, given everything we just saw. Beyond that, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here on the fly, but, I actually like the ship battle stuff. A little dry, a little grindy towards the end when there was no real challenge anymore. But I liked it. I feel like it was the most solid of the three sort of mini games Owlcat likes to supplement their CRPGs with. I do feel like, combat difficulty aside, the whole character build system was just kind of a chore, especially with the periodic, sweeping balance overhauls. I was deliberately avoiding respeccing our characters towards the end because it was just too much of a time sink to go back and pour over 40 to 60 levels worth of newly balanced abilities to try to figure out what might work together to give me some halfway amusing playstyle, which, you know, again, really just wasn't necessary since we were curb stomping everything anyway. I mean, even if I had kept Cabela in the party, she still would have done okay. We just wouldn't have been able to abuse death from above as much. That was the main thing in her build that got hit with the nerf hammer. But yeah, they could definitely stand a tone down on that, and thankfully, I think it does look like they did in Dark Heresy. It's still a bit more chunky than I think I'd like, but I feel like it's also definitely better than Rogue Trader, as far as just sheer overwhelming walls of numbers and nuanced effects. Gear was also just overly complicated. You know, there was a lot of gear I looked at where I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but I really don't want to figure out how to fit it into my build. But yeah, I mean, I'm really just rambling at this point, but overall I enjoyed it. A fun 2 years worth of content, which I just definitely do not regret playing through. It's nice to actually get it done, and I do think it was worth it. I feel like we got a pretty good send-off there with a solid hour worth of epilogues. Maybe a bit much there, but I'd rather have too much closure than not enough. I think my only real issue there is that they got a little carried away with trying to constantly inject a little extra grimdark by often pushing things forward 50, 100 years. At which point, you know, you might as well be like, and then they died 50 to 100 years later, because that's how old age works. But, you know, I get it. You know, I joked about it earlier with the grimdark quota and all, but it is a Games Workshop game. They want their setting to be bordering on, like, parody levels of grimdark. It was one of the things I would often run into when I would try to run the tabletop Warhammer Fantasy game, which I did like. But there were a lot of adventures where, like, the players would be set off to perform some heroic act to rescue someone or save something or whatnot, only to ultimately come to an ending where it was, like, bittersweet at best. They stopped the bad guy, but it was too late to save X or to fully stop Y from happening. And there would be some often nightmarish, just like, good job, but this is how the world works, sort of ending. So, you know, I blame that more on Games Workshop than I do on Owlcat. They're just playing by Games Workshop's rules. And, you know, oftentimes it's stuff that was just silly anyway. Oh, boys, my throat is just about shot, so I really should wrap it up there. But yes, TLDR, finally at the end, really enjoyed it. Do not regret playing it, looking forward to Dark Heresy. But in the interim, plenty of other things for us to enjoy. And with this project done, we might finally circle back and start chipping away at Wrath. We were like, what, 2/3 through? That's another gargantuan forever project. That's like a 200-hour game. One which I would still like to finish, even if it is a bit of a long-term commitment. Though I think I would be loath to perhaps jump into any other 200-plus hour games quite as eagerly in the future. You know, maybe focus on like 30 to 60-hour games a little more moving forward. So you know what? That said, aside from your general thoughts about the game's finale, and the game in general, feel free to drop your thoughts on what you might like to see me play next, or return to next. And, you know, no matter what we end up doing, hopefully it's something you enjoy. And perhaps I'll see you then. Oh, and special thanks to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible, including but not limited to Eerie V23, Revenant, Alois, Zero Bowman, Dragon Matrix 7, Drakiith, EgonAlter, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, James Trimmier, Lady Shayna, Mark Giemza, RandomPassrby, RobbyB, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, if you'd also like to help the channel and perhaps see me finish more series like this one, then be sure to hit the various buttons that do the things. Trust me, it does make a difference. Or you could even check out the PayPal, the Patreon, the Nexus GG, or the YouTube memberships. Links are in the description. Alright, I gotta go finish packing. Catch you on the flip.
Reality is a tapestry of country.